Welcome to the show. I am Jason Sutton, aka The Guru, and it's my job to dissect, analyze, break down, and ultimately share with all of you good people out there the routines and life lessons of high performers in the teaching business. On today's episode, I'm very excited to have my good friend Tom Stickney on the show. Tom is the Director of Instruction and Business Development at Punta Minta in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. He's a Golf Magazine Top 100 teacher and has been honored as a Golf Digest Best Teacher and a Golf Tips Top 25 instructor. Tom is also a Trackman University Master/Partner, a distinction held by less than 15 people in the world. So this guy knows his stuff, especially when it comes to technology and Trackman. So we have a very interesting discussion on a variety of topics as usual. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get to my conversation with Tom Stickney. Enjoy. All right. Tom Stickney, my brother, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. I really appreciate it.
Well, it's an honor and a pleasure to talk to the great golf guru that you are. So hopefully I'll be a good guest and I'll actually learn something from you, brother.
We're going to learn from you, my man. This thing's all about you, not about me.
All righty. Sounds great.
So it was great to catch up with you yesterday. I know we hadn't talked for a minute. And it just seems to me that you're doing something right because the views from your office just keep getting better and better. So tell us a little bit about where you're at now before we take the listeners back in your career.
Back in the day, uphill both ways in the snow. Actually, I've been in Mexico for the last 3 years after leaving Southern California and during the winters, and Vail, Colorado, and Park City in the summers. And I'm down here in Puerto Vallarta, and I was working for another golf course organization where we had courses all over Mexico, and I was running their golf academies and doing business development. And now I've got a chance to move over to a place still here in Vallarta, a little bit north of Puerto Vallarta, about 30 minutes, called Punta Mita. And the great thing about Punta Mita, we have 2 Nicholas signatures with 14 holes oceanfront, another 8 with ocean views, of 4 seasons of St. Regis, and 350 members and a million homes and lots and all that kind of good stuff for sale. So it's quite the interesting operation. Obviously surrounded on 3 sides by water, so we get a chance to see a lot of surfers, a lot of whales, and a lot of boats. So it's a neat little operation. It's a great place to hang my hat and dodge some cold weather. So I'm pretty excited.
Yeah, it looks fantastic. You sent me the pictures, and I've been doing a little research on it, and I can't wait to get down there and work with you and bring some of my members. So that's going to be exciting.
Yeah, it'll be fun. It's hard to have a bad time in Mexico. It's funny because, what's portrayed in the States in the media and what's reality are 2 different things. And and if you know me, I don't like cities. I don't like crowds. I don't like a lot of, I'm a small town kind of person. And, you read in the paper, I still look at the American stuff, and you think you're going to get your head lopped off if you come across the border, but nothing could be further from the truth here in Vallarta. And, it's a neat little place. And for the people that want to come down here and want to venture down here, they're pleasantly surprised that it is a sleepy little fishing village. And, it's certainly not what you think. Now, I'm quite sure, I wouldn't be going to maybe some of the border towns. Maybe that's not a good idea. But, for the most part, the rest of Mexico on the coast is pretty laid back. And, if you like sun and fun and a few margaritas, I don't think you can find a better place.
Sounds amazing. So speaking of margaritas, I told you that drinking is not optional on this podcast. So what do we have? What do we have in this evening?
I really wish that I could tell you that I had a big cerveza sitting right here or a big old tequila, but I just got off the lesson tee helping my director of golf, and I was fumbling around on a bunch of other things here on my desk that I hadn't gotten around to doing this afternoon because of about 6 or 7 meetings today. So unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to get it up there, but there is a bottle of wine on my director of golf's desk over here. What is that? Castillo El del Diablo. It's a Pinot. If I had a Swiss Army knife, I might be able to break into that thing, but I think I'm stuck today.
Nice. So that's actually what I'm having right now. I just opened up a nice little Oregon Pinot.
Well, you are quite the wine aficionado. I mean,
wild heels.
I'm surprised you're not a sommelier on the side, knowing you.
Yeah, I'm on my way. I think. I think if you measure it by how many you drink, I think that I should probably have 2 degrees in that.
Yeah, I've seen a few of your tweets over the years, bud. Seen you at a few functions.
Awesome. All right, so let's get into it. Let's take you back, or take the listeners back a little bit in your career, maybe even to the beginning of your childhood, and because this podcast is really to reach out to other coaches and to kind of give them some lineage of sort of what you've gone through, and then what makes up Tom Stickney and how he got to be as successful as he is today. So let's take the listeners back to the beginning.
Well, it's you know, I, like everybody, or like most people were, love sports and played everything as a kid, and was fortunate enough to be a pretty decent athlete. I was a little bit smaller and fast, and actually loved soccer more than anything else. But it was funny, even at a young age, I wanted to be a pro athlete, and I think every kid wants to be a pro athlete. And for me, all I remember from soccer is that the only professional teams I'd ever seen, at that time were over in Europe. And, I didn't, as a kid, you don't know anything any better. And you say, well, I don't want to go to Europe, and so that kind of led to what else can I do? And, my father and mother played golf, and we were always fortunate enough to be members of a club. And so when we moved to Memphis when I was about 5, my parents joined Colonial Country Club, which had the, it's Danny Thomas St. Jude Memphis Classic, and the FedEx, and all the stuff. And then it moved venues, later on in my adult life. But for many years as a kid, we lived on the 15th hole, which is a little par 3. So I'd walk over there and watch the pros, and I'd work on the range and during the tournament, and and that's what I decided I wanted to do. And it was really neat because to get a chance to watch professionals up close and in person at a young age, especially at that time when it was a much more colorful endeavor, and more of a, it wasn't so robotic as it is now. I think back then it was, they didn't know much about fitness, and the smoking and the drinking and the partying and the carrying on was a lot more prevalent back in the day. So you did hear a lot of fun characters. And I remember as a kid, I walked around with this one year with Gene Littler, Charles Cootie, and Dale Douglas. And they were just as nice as they could be to me. I still have pictures. Matter of fact, on my computer, my mother just found them, believe it or not, of me. I must have been 8, 9, 10, 11, somewhere around there. And they had pictures of them. And it was kind of neat. So that's kind of started. And, so after walking around with those guys, I think I want to do this. So fast forward many years into high school and college, for me, I went to Memphis State. That shows you how old I am. The last graduating class of Memphis State before it became University of Memphis.
Did you play golf there?
High school and college. And,
yeah.
It always seemed like, from a skills package standpoint, I was always helping my other teammates when they were struggling on the range or in tournaments, as opposed to me going out and shooting 68. And, I think as I look back on it, I think you end up gravitating knowingly or unknowingly towards what you're best at. And I certainly didn't have as I look back on it, I had the talent from a physical standpoint to move it from point A to point B pretty decent, to at least be a notch or two under, good enough to try. But mentally, I didn't like being away from home. Still don't like being away from home. And the traveling, the emotional instability of golf, and the psychological taxation on just your everyday well-being was just not my strong suit. And it's funny, the only thing in life, and I have no idea why, but the only thing in life I have patience in is teaching golf. And I have no idea why. If I could apply that to other parts of my life, I'd probably be a much happier person. But it's just, that's the way it is. So, for me, once I got out of school, I only played on the mini tour long enough to realize that, wow, I'm not very good compared to these guys. And it's just not, I'm pushing a rope uphill, the old square peg in a round hole type of thing. And, as we all know, people who have played golf for a living, and, you look at some people and you go, wow, that guy was just he was cut out to be a tour pro. And then other people, you go, wow, he was missing the putter, or he was missing this, or he was missing that. That was always what I was. So I had an opportunity when I got out of school and I played the mini tour, I came back and there was a guy that it was a funny story. He was 28. He was going to inherit $5 million when he turned 30. And he was a director of golf at this 45-hole golf course, semi-private, had 1,000+ members in Memphis. It was very, very, I think it was 126.50 per month for the dues. And so, a lot of brown baggers went out and played. It was great. And he wanted to play golf for a living, and the assistant had just inherited a bunch of money from his father who had passed away after playing in the NFL. So they needed a teacher because they were getting run over for lessons. And they looked at me. We were playing a money game one day, and he said, "You want to teach?" And I said, "Well, sure, I guess." And the rest is history. And actually got lucky enough to find what I love to do, what I actually was good at doing. And I was actually at a time, and this, being our age, we were at a time it was the golden age of golf. It was just on the beginnings. This is back in the early 90s. So it was just on the upswing of the courses being constructed, of teaching technology coming out. And I embraced all of the teaching technology. I always made a fact to have all the 3D motion analysis, the force plates and all that stuff, even when they were terrible at best because there was no technology. But I knew that I had to differentiate myself based on everybody else, and because I had no experience, and so that's what I started to do, and and it just blew up from there. And so it was a wonderful way for me to understand what I was good at, get lucky enough to find something that I was good at, and now 25, 26, 27 years later, still doing the same thing. I look back on it, and you thank the good Lord that I didn't have to flounder around and find 8 jobs before I settled in on what made me happy and made me some money. So, I just look up and say, thank you, good Lord, because I certainly didn't do any of this knowingly. It just kind of all happened.
Absolutely. So take me back, like when you started teaching, was there, and say you were playing the mini tours, was there a defining moment that pushed you in that direction, or you think you just had that much self-awareness to go, I really think this teaching thing is going to be my deal?
It's funny. I played with a guy. All I remember his name is Sheiky, and I have no idea whatever became of this guy. But we played I think it was called Cypress Creek in Orlando. I'm almost certain it was a little tree-lined little golf course. I shoot 74, he shoots 64, and I looked at him when we finished, and I'm like, did we just play the same golf course? And I just knew that I just didn't have it. I mean, it was one of those things where when you play with a tour player now, when they finish, you add them up and you go, boy, three whipped it there, and he hit it out of bounds there, and he didn't hit that green to get up and down, and you go 64. Wow, that's the worst he could have shot. And when I added up my 74, I hoopy-dooed it from the fairway, made 3 bombs, and and had my full handicap. So I think that really opened my eyes to the fact that I'm just not good enough, and maybe a little bit of practice could have gotten to that point, possibly, but I also knew deep down mentally I just didn't have the emotional stability to do that. And I don't think even today at 47 years of age, if you'd have taken my head and put it on my shoulders back then, I still don't think it would have made me happy. I think I would have just floundered around long enough to be miserable, and you have to go find something else to do. So I think that started it. And then when I came back and was given this opportunity, I think I was so young and naive that I didn't really consider what I was going to do. I had an exercise science degree, which wasn't going to push me in any direction that I really cared much about. So I really don't know. I probably would have followed the steps of my father and been an investment banker, or sorry, it was my alarm to make sure I called you. Okay. Maybe investment banker or in the managed futures business where he is now. But I don't know. I don't know what would have happened. Obviously professional wrestling was out, so that was it.
I asked the last guest that we had, my friend Michael, that what would you be doing if you weren't in the golf business? And I said I would have been a professional fly fisherman. So I'm pretty much qualified to do nothing except for teach golf.
I would love to have been a professional wrestler in all seriousness, because I grew up in Memphis, but unfortunately I was skipping the gene pool, so that wasn't going to happen. So there you go.
Yep, there you go. All right. So this is a question asked to every guest, but I think it kind of gets a good discussion going because, especially as we've been in the business a few years and we start to gravitate towards giving advice to young coaches. And that's really what this show is all about is what advice would you give, say, a passionate young coach, or even as far back as maybe a PGM student that's interning for you? What kind of advice would you give them getting into the
Great
teaching
question.
business?
And it's funny because it has changed dramatically since when you and I started to now.
100%. Yeah, before video and before launch monitors and all that stuff, and before the internet, right? Just a few years before the internet.
I mean, I remember asking a very top name 1% teacher that's very world renowned, even currently, if I could shadow one of his schools, because that was the teacher that I had gone to of choice back in the early 90s, like 1990, 1991. And he said, sure, for $1,000 a day, you can come shadow anything.
Can you
people don't understand that there wasn't YouTube, and the only thing you could do was get books, and there wasn't a World Wide Web, and it was a very proprietary closed shop back then. And everybody was very, very protective of what they knew and the secrets that they knew, so to speak. And, because everybody was teaching a model swing, kind of basically what they believed. So, if teacher X was having some success, he wanted to keep it to himself as opposed to let teacher Y figure it out. So I guess going back to your question, first thing, you've got an abundance of knowledge and wealth of knowledge on the internet. You can Google anybody, and you can pretty much find videos and articles and things that everybody's written. The first thing I would do is I would read and I would study everything under the sun, from every swing theory, every swing model, any kind of theory that is out there from the golfing machine back, or actually the search for the perfect swing back in the late 50s, the golfing machine, all the way up to, some of the stuff that Quan and Como and all those and Sasha are doing now, on all the heavy duty, deep stuff. That's the first thing I would do, because you have to, as the teacher, you need to know how to fly the plane as well as how the plane operates itself. That doesn't mean you espouse all the information that's in your head, but you need to understand if somebody comes up to you and says, you know what, I had some great success with gravity golf, back when I played 10 years ago, and I've taken 10 years off. I want to start there. You better have an idea of what that actually is and was, and whatever, however you can work it from here. Or, somebody comes up to you and says, look, I really admire what Bryson's doing with the one plane motion, or the single axis motion rather. You better have an understanding of what he's doing so you can at least be relevant. And I think,
yeah, I think that's I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think that's why we get along so well, because we're sort of from the same era. But, the young guys that I'm mentoring now, like, they don't read as much as we did back in the day. I think we were probably forced to find the information in the ways that were available. But I'm totally agree with that. I always say I read everybody's book and try to figure out everybody's philosophy just for that reason, where the student comes to you and regurgitates whatever information they've been given from that coach. You better understand which is relevant, which isn't. And that way you can decipher on what you're going to do with that player.
Because by all means, I mean, look,
100%.
There's a lot of stuff that I don't fully buy into, but I love to read it because it expands my knowledge. And there's always great points to every swing model or swing theory that's out there. Not all of it I agree with, but a lot of it I do. And there's a lot of things that have influenced me to be a better teacher. So I think the first thing is to read and use the internet effectively. The second thing is, because of the internet, now you can find the top teachers in your state, the top teachers, the top 100, the top 50, the top ladies teachers, the top teachers from the Golf Range Association, blah, blah. There's, and golf tips, top teachers, so on and so forth. Go find those people and go spend time with those people. Take a lesson from those people. Figure out what they do different. Figure out how they speak. Figure out what they are and what makes them whom they are. And find the guys in your region that seem to have the most success. What are they doing? Is it, are they golf machine guys? Are they do they do 3D motion analysis? Or force plates, whatever. Figure out what they're good at, and then from there, I think once you establish your own beliefs, and I think you've taken the time to go see some people, I think from there, the first thing you need to do is go intern for somebody that you believe in, and while you're doing that, work 2 jobs and save some money so you can buy a Trackman, a Foresight, a flight scope, or whatever it is that you need. You have to have some sort of technology now to be effective. And I'll be the first to say, look, I don't think anybody in the industry is happy about writing a check for, tens of thousands of dollars for a launch monitor. But I can promise you this, if I didn't have it, I certainly wouldn't be as successful and as good as I am with my students right now, only because that machine is watching me, the teacher, not the student. So of course it's going to tell me, me what the student is doing. But I need to know, if I say you need to do X, Y, or Z, if the numbers don't start moving in the right direction, then I'm doing something wrong. And when it comes to the numbers, the last thing I'll say about and you'll appreciate this, I think that the biggest problem that these young kids will face is the same thing that you and I faced when video first came out. When video first came out, it was position golf. You should put the club here, 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 here. Had to look pretty, had to be there. You had to swing. It had to look this way. And I think the first wave of the first generation or two of these Trackman teachers have gotten caught up in zeroing out the plane or wanting to have your swing, your swing path at 2 degrees right, or your angle of attack at X, Y, or Z, And then I think now, as we get better with it, as we've all used it more, I'm much more a user, and I think that a lot of these kids are going to get better at, as we are, is saying, hey, look, you just need to move there's ranges that you can play with it. It's not an exact number. There's no such thing as an exact number. But you know what? If you're going to find that, let's say that your path is too much into out, you can say, look, man, we don't need it to be 0, but we sure don't need it north of 10. So if you can keep it somewhere, 4 to 7, life's pretty good. And the student looks at me and says, how do I keep it 4 to 7? I said, well, let's experiment. Let's figure out how you do it. So I think more than anything else is we'll stop being so position or / number oriented with Trackman as in the next generation or two. And then it's Katie bar the door for these kids, because, if you think about it, let's say that it took you and I 10,000 hours of lessons to be decent. Now with the right information, it might take another kid 3,000 hours, 5,000 hours of lessons to be decent. And all of a sudden, as they learn more and more, they're going to make fewer mistakes. And now it's just a matter of learning how to relate with people and knowing how to fix X, Y, and Z. And I think that the level of instruction of non-technical, very important non-technical instruction, is going to get much better in the coming generations. I think right now we're in kind of that lull where it's, you'll hear the guys on TV talking that it's a little too technical. Yeah, I think it has. And I think that's just the growing pains of new technology. But I'll promise you this, you let these kids hold on to it for another generation or two, and then they'll be teaching very simply with like it's no big deal, and it won't be, and they'll be a hell of a lot better teachers than you and I ever thought about being, in my opinion.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, I think, what I preach to my guys and what I see that the best teachers, and I've watched, a lot of the top teachers teach that are considered to be technical teachers. And if you go watch them actually teach, it's very, very simplified. They understand the information, but then the way they communicate that to the student is on their level, depending on the student that they're dealing with. So they use the language, as technical as they need to, or they dumb it down a little bit as well. But it's amazing, how much that they blend, what would be considered technical with sort of old school, which I think myself and you are sort of on the same page there. So the way we teach and our styles are very similar.
And you'll read a lot on the social media stuff about, people are getting all wound up about guys using different nomenclature than, and I'm all for, believe me, I'm all for people educating themselves and people trying to to better golf instruction. But the bottom line is, and I think we all have to go through this as teachers, it's not about impressing everybody or all your students with how much you know. At the end of the day, it's really about, did they have fun and did they get better and are they coming back? And you know what? There's a lot of guys that know more than I'll ever know times 10 about the golf swing, but they can't convey it. They can't do it in a fun manner, and they confuse students with too much information. And all of a sudden now they've just created somebody that's going to be frustrated. I mean, let's face it, it's just a game. And I tell people, it's just golf, people. You know what?
Yep.
If Mr. Johnson comes to me for a lesson and I try my best and he doesn't get better, you know what? He's still going to eat steak and his wife still loves him. But you know what? As long as you're trying to get better, as long as you're trying to help people and you try to do the right thing and you try to tailor it to their level and do as best you can, that's all I can really do. I mean, I have no control over somebody, what they do with the information I give them. You know, I can't tell somebody to practice. I can't tell somebody to do mirror work or do this. If they're going to practice, they're going to get practice. If they're going to get better, they're going to get better. And hopefully they will use the money that they spend with me wisely and practice and try to get a little bit better. But if they don't, you know, there's not much I can do about it. All I can do is do what I can do, and it's up to them to do what they have to do.
Yeah, totally agree. So this next question is good because I think you are one of the best at having sort of a blend of what I would call IQ versus EQ. You know, you have fantastic information, you do your homework, you're a continuous learner, but you also are one of the best at like making the student feel comfortable. I mean, you've got a great personality, you got a great bedside manner, and I got to feel like your students just have so much fun working with you and leaving the lesson feeling so good about themselves, which I feel like is a good trait to have as a top coach. So let's say when we're developing as a top teacher, do you consider IQ or EQ more important? And how do you develop both?
You have to have some knowledge, you know, to generate success, because if the student is not successful at whatever you're asking them to do and they don't see positive results, then the lesson goes south pretty quickly. So I think you have to have a certain IQ to get started. But once you have a certain understanding, then I think it becomes a lot about, especially at the top levels, a lot about bedside manner and having fun. I mean, you know, I know I've been very fortunate to work at high-end places where a lot of our members have plenty of money to do whatever they want. And I continually hear a story about Butch Harmon, you know, especially when they would go see him, you know, over the last 5 years. And I bet I've had 5 to 10 people go see Butch Harmon. And every one of them comes back with the same overall information. They said, wow, that's a good lesson. Wasn't anything that was earth shattering that I hadn't heard before, but man, he had some great stories. And it was just amazing to spend time with the guy. And I think that's so important because I'm quite sure that at the top levels of instruction, you can pretty much go to a lot of people and you're going to pretty much hear the same basic philosophy of what you're doing wrong. It'll differ, you know, when we talk about how to cure X, Y, or Z. But for the most part, you can say, look, you're getting the club too much in behind, you're coming over it, and, you know, your path is too far left, your face is right of the path, you're hitting big slices. That's not the hard part. I think once you have the IQ, I think then it's an ability to, you know, it is golf. It is a game. And you know what? You and I spend more time on the lesson team, you know, where we should have a couch over there, you know, like a psychologist or psychiatrist,
right,
than watching people do this athletic endeavor. So I think a lot of it boils down to, and especially when you get into the private club market, you better be fun to be around. You better have a good personality, and you better make people better quickly. Because if you don't, you'll be out of a job. That's not as important at a busy resort where I worked in the first part of my career, you know, in resorts, and actually where I am now. But I think I was lucky enough to have both of those experiences. because they are radically different. And especially the member club, you better, and of course I was always a contractor. So, hey, if I didn't do a good job, nobody's going to take less and then Tom doesn't eat. So that's a problem. And like I said, I think the
Right.
older I get, the more I realize that it's just golf. It really is. People, we take it all way too seriously. It is no different, it is no different than you and I going out in the driveway with your son and we go shoot basketball, you know, except the goal, the court costs a little bit more money and, it is what it is. That's the only difference. It's still a game.
Yeah, I think you definitely have to love people. I mean, that's the thing I love about my job is I'm so curious about like sort of getting into the world of my student that sometimes it even gets heavy into the EQ for me, but it's so fascinating, especially because we're teaching people that are successful in other fields, and we learn from them. But it's so interesting to talk to them about what's made them successful, and it also helps us to help them with their golf game and their learning style. Did you think that's a trained skill, or you think it's just something you pick up through
I spent a
experience?
lot of time reading books on the mental side of the game and motor learning. And, I was always a big Mike Heverin fan when I was a kid. Uh, and Mike was one of the most
Me
well-read,
too.
still to this day, is one of the most well-read individuals on things that were outside of golf, and I think I followed in that trait to some degree to figure out how do people learn, what are the best ways to teach and how does motor learning, how does learning a smaller sub skill build up into a bigger skill and, things like that. So I think that some of it needs to be learned, but I also think, like you said earlier, I think you're either a people person or you're not. And if you are an extroverted people type of person, you will find a way because it's in your nature to interact with people on a way that they can have fun and in a way where that you find success. I mean, let's face it, you get one of my favorite stories is I had a guy that was he had two PhDs from MIT in aeronautical engineering. It was aeronautical engineering and something else. I mean, he was a legitimate rocket scientist, and I still laugh at it every time I go to his house. I always go down and I pointed his MIT degree. I said, "Andy, I knew you were a rocket scientist." And dealing with Andy was a very interesting endeavor because the way Andy would listen and react was radically different than somebody who is an artist or somebody who is just it's just I think it's just a learned thing. I mean, excuse me, I think it was learned, but then I think you also figure out how to
Right.
work the room, so to speak. How do I deal with a guy that's uber intelligent and learns in that way and wants to know everything about everything versus another guy comes in the next hour and he's just like, just put me on the side of the hill and tell me what to feel. So and I think that goes back to being successful
Right.
as a contractor. If you either learned how to do it or you didn't eat. So
Right. Yeah, I think a big thing is, I always talk to my guys about, reading body language and just paying attention, right? Watching the way people move, watching the way they react to the information you're giving them and just sort of digging into their learning styles a little bit, but also, just figuring out their personality and how they're going to learn the best, and then just listening better, I think is probably one of the biggest things that I've learned over my career is learning when to not talk and getting them to talk to you and
you
give
could,
give you the feedback. I think
that's
is super
probably the
important.
greatest thing a young teacher can learn. And it's still something that I work on a daily basis is, trying to say in two sentences what I say in a paragraph currently and having the same meaning. And, the good Lord gave you two ears and one mouth, and I guess we should use them accordingly.
That's right. All right, so let's shift gears a little bit here and dig into again some of my rapid fire questions here that I think are always good discussions and have decent or some interesting answers. But through your career, and this could be golf or life or whatever, describe a failure or an apparent failure that has set you up for later success.
Question. I still
Do you have a favorite failure?
In Memphis, a guy by the name of Gordon Kirkwood. And Gordon, if you're out there, I owe you a free lesson series, bud. And I promise you, I might even pay you to come back, as bad as I screwed you up. I had just started teaching. I just bought, it's called the Swing Motion Trainer, which was the precursor to 3D motion analysis. Did the X Factor years ago. And I had a split screen video. And he comes in, and whatever I said, he took to the nth degree. And if I said, I don't know, do X, he would do it 3 times over. And by the time I got through with 4 lessons or 3 or 4, I can't remember what I did back in the day, but by the time I got through with him, he had just screwed himself all up and couldn't do it. And I took the guy in probably, let's say, 3 hours over the course of our lesson series. I think from probably shooting 85 to 205. And, and it just reminded me that at that stage, like I said earlier, it was all about, I was so impressed with myself about what I had learned that I had basically spouted so much information to this guy that I had tied him up in knots, and I had destroyed his game because I was too busy beating my own chest and massaging my own ego to make sure that this guy knew that, wow, this kid's smart. When the reality of the fact is, it's not about being smart. It's not about being the most knowledgeable guy. Sure, that helps. And sure, I'd love to know everything about it. I love to listen to guys that know more about the swing and the thing than I do. But the bottom line is, if you can't convey it in a way that the student can improve, it's not worth anything. I mean, and this will hit home with everybody because I'm terrible in math, but how many algebra classes did I sit through in college with a professor that knew trigonometry and calculus and whatever else is past that stuff that I can't even conceptualize, and they couldn't even teach me algebra because it was just, they were so far past that and I failed every class. And I think that's the whole thing. Just because you happen to know a lot about ground reaction forces or a lot about the Trackman or a lot about biomechanics doesn't necessarily mean that you're a great teacher. It means you have a great information base, and that's a very positive thing, but you've got to work it into a way where the students can understand it, and it's got to be practical. I mean, quite frankly, if Mrs. Haverkamp's out there and she's 90 years old, I'd love to sit there and talk to her about her kinematic sequence and and left foot fixation and the secondary axis tilt and all that kind of stuff. But the bottom line is, she's trying not to stick her pick in the ground. I mean, and all I'm trying to do is get this thing airborne. So I think at a certain point, you've got to stop trying to woo everybody with your information. I think now, as I get older, I start to realize that they're more impressed with leaving the lesson, hitting it a lot better than they are with anything that I said. I don't think they remember anything else I said. All they remember is, well, I hit a couple good shots, and maybe I might be wrong, but at least Gordon taught me a good thing about that. So Gordon, I apologize, buddy.
So let's stay on that for a second. So take us back to after that lesson, because I mean, we've all had them, and we've all been like, end of the lesson, you're like, what just happened? I've completely ruined this guy, and what am I going to do? Like, what kind of self-talk did you have? Did you do, because I teach my guys to like sit down and like write things out. Like, if my guys have a tough lesson, they'll write it out, which sort of helps them sort of get it in their head of what they felt like they did well, what they did poorly, what would they do differently. And I used to keep journals to this day, and I did as a young coach because I had a lot to write down, which stuff that I didn't want to do the next day after I'd made a lot of mistakes.
I think
so take us through that mindset.
Is I never had anybody mentor me. I was always too stubborn. I wanted to do it myself. But what you had said about the journaling is brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Something I have not done like that, but at the end of every season, I'd go back introspectively and I'd say, okay, what did I do well? And what did I not do well? And it could be anything from business to client interaction to marketing to teaching. And And I really think that, and I wish I'd have journaled it because I probably would have
reflection
gotten a
is
lot
so
better
important.
quicker because I'd have had more stuff to go back and look at. But at the end of the season, and even to this day, I go, okay, what am I good at? And this is being dead serious. What I suck at? What am I not very good at? And it's funny because it still rings true that I'm really good at a lot of things in teaching. But man, there's things that I'm not very good at in teaching that I need to get better at. And had I not been introspective, instead of having 3 things that I really need to work on, I'd have probably had 50 things I needed to work on. And so for me, it's always a constant battle to work on the things that I know I'm not very good at, or I'm not as good as I should be. And I think it's tough to look in that mirror sometimes, especially when with your ego and we all go through periods of times when you teach lessons and you go, the easiest thing in the world, I'm a genius. And then you have a couple bad lessons, you go, God, I'm terrible. And then you go back to the thing that, you know what, I'm not very good at X, or boy, I need to
Yeah.
get better at Y, and I think those are the things that you can't forget. You can't just. It's not about making money. It's not about trying to be, on teaching guys on tour. All you can do is be a better you. And I think journaling and taking an introspective look at yourself and being very honest with yourself. I mean, I'm the first to admit, as much as I'd love to be a great high school coach, as far as coaching high school kids, I've never dealt with a lot of high school kids because I've never been in markets where we've had a lot of kids with a lot of speed. And, and quite frankly, I'm not very good at it. I wish I was better. But it's things like that I need to get better at. And as a coach, I'm not ashamed to admit my faults and say, look, and I've had plenty of kids when I lived in other markets or high school kids that would come to me with, and I'm talking 120 mile an hour swing speeds. I got Mrs. Hartman who just moved at 43 miles an hour. So, I mean, that was my last lesson. So 120, I haven't seen that many people with 120 mile an hour club head speed where I go, you know what? You need to go down the street. You need to go see this guy who deals with these guys all the time, or things like that. And I think you're doing yourself justice and the student justice to say, hey, look, I need to step back before I'm willing to take on students that I'm not ready for, whether it be for me, that high schooler with a lot of speed, or it could be X, Y, or Z for somebody else.
Right. Yeah, that's really good advice. So I find it hard to believe that you haven't had any mentors.
I was always a big
I mean,
golf
somebody's
machine
had to
guy.
help you
I
along.
still
Like, who would you say it's been your
I
biggest
think
influences
because of the
in
time
your
that I
career,
grew
and
up,
what have you learned from them?
that was really something that was based on science, and it was something. And when I had the SMT, and that was the first kind of entry into biomechanics, and then I had the AMM, the 12 sensor AMM, which is really, really technical, as far as biomechanics. I think, I know that
Sure.
oh, no question. Yeah, it's funny. There's two guys that I always, yeah,
Who
when you get
introduced who
talking to and you
introduced
have
you
to
to the
cross
golfing
the room.
machine? I mean,
It was
somebody
funny.
had
There
to
was a
give
guy
you
by the
that
name of
book,
Charlie Long out of Memphis who's still there
and who deciphered
and
it for
was
you after
always
you got
one of
it.
my favorite people. And here I am teaching my second year teaching. I've spent all this money on this SMT, and I've got camera system and the rudimentary force plate uh, that had just come out, and I'm supposed to, here I am. I'm supposed to know everything. And he would give a lesson. I go, wow, he's saying some stuff that A, I've never heard of, and B, sounds a hell of a lot more impressive than what I'm spouting off over here. So somebody's missing something, and I don't think it's him. Uh, so I asked him, hey, what is this? And he said, it's golf machine. He had learned from Alex Sloan and Tom Tomasello. And then I had gotten into it. Charlie helped me a little bit. And then I actually had moved away from Memphis. I moved down to North Florida. And a gentleman by the name of Chuck Evans, who still, yeah, and Chuck, everybody knows in the business knows that you want to ask anybody anything about the golf machine, there's one guy you're asking, is Chuck Evans. And I mean, yeah, and he's
Yeah, one of
brilliant.
my
I mean, say,
mentors.
there's a period out of place on page 72 on the top third paragraph. He's amazing. And so Chuck
That's right. He's my guy.
would help me through that and help me a whole bunch. And then from there, I think
Yeah.
after the golfing machine, I remember getting a copy of the Morad tape out when Mac was in Palm Springs, in his little tidy whitey shorts and his little wife beater with little wristbands on. And he was talking about motor set and, and, and foveal lock and all that stuff. And it was brilliant to me. And I watched that.
Yeah,
and
I've
then
got that one.
I actually went to go see Mac for 4 days in Valencia.
Right.
And, went through his school. And so I think for me, it was a lot of the stuff that I wanted to learn was the more scientific based stuff. So I think, from the golfing machine, from Chuck and Charlie, and then learning a little bit from Mac when he would speak to me, because he didn't speak to anybody anymore. So yeah, I got kicked out. I'm off the Christmas card list. That was good. And then, when I was fortunate enough to
Before
get in
kicked
the
out.
top 100 circles, really spending time with the guys that I idolized and looked up to. And now, as you do, being on the top 100, when you have access to Mike Adams and Chuck Evans and Butch Harmon and, Sean Foley, you can just keep on going to be able to pick up the phone and call Sean or Chris Como and go, hey, I have a question. Boom. And that to me is the neat thing, or being able to, to call Cameron McCormick and go, come on, what are you doing with Justin now? What's going on? And it just, to me, that has taken it to the next level for me, as far as being able to have access to the people where I can ask them questions that pop in my mind and that I can't find on the internet, I guess. So that, to me, when it comes to mentoring and things, I think those are really my only mentors. I think for me, if, in this day and age, it really would have been nice if I'd have been, 20 years younger, 20, 30 years younger. I would have really liked to have found a guy that, like a Sean Foley or a Chris Como, that seems to be able to take all the super technical stuff and squash it down into something that's understandable. And, I look at those guys and I listen to those guys and I go, wow, that's pretty impressive that you can take all that technical stuff and make it where it's understandable and put it to a level where it's, Rosie just won last week. So obviously he's doing something right, so.
Right. Yeah, it's funny that Chris was just at my place few weeks ago, and offered to
Right.
let him use my Trackman and body track or whatever, and he's like, "Nah, I'm good." I watched him teach, and he didn't use any technology. And this is a guy that would be considered technical, right, to the people that don't understand. And it was so simple, and it was more for him about managing the environment, managing the student, and then giving him just spoon feeding him the information and getting that player to do something different. And it was brilliant because it was so non-technical, as people would say.
And I think,
that's the thing that makes coaches great, is being able to take all that stuff and then not have to use it. That's for the student mostly. It's not for the coach.
Not more technical. And the more information, and I love the fact of having, all the tiles up and seeing every bit of that information pop through, and me only and saying, okay,
Correct.
Do me a favor, aim more to the right, or square your shoulders, or do X, Y, or Z. All that information is coming in, and it funnels down into just a simple little aim more to the right, or put more weight on your heels, and I think that is when you really get to when you really get the hang of using technology. I think that it becomes like what you just said. It becomes very, very simple, and the student wouldn't know if you're using it or you're not.
Right. It sharpens your eye, I think. Plus, it just gets you to the solution much quicker than you ever did. And again, I always tell them Trackman is basically helping us to quantify the feel of the change. number one, and also how much you need to exaggerate that change in order to, yeah, it's just like I've always loved, you said it's an MRI of
Yeah, no
impact.
question. And you know what? I think we've
We're
all fumbled
doctors,
around the
right?
recipe
So
long
we're
enough that,
and
it's
we're
really
using
nice
equipment
to
that's
have a guy
available
make
us
two or three swings
to
and know
really
exactly
get
where
to
you're
that
going, exactly
answer
what you're working
much
on. You
quicker
look at some of the 3D data
than
or
just guessing.
The pressure trace, and you go, God, I got it. And let's go fix it. So instead of, banging around for 45 minutes, you can get this guy clicking, in 15 or 20, and and he's happy.
Right.
Oh, no problem. My pleasure.
100%. All right, so a couple more rapid fires here to kind of get in more. Then we'll wrap up. You've been very generous with your time, and I appreciate it. So one, this is a new one that I've been kind of messing with. Is I think as continuous learners, it's important for us to always sort of stay in the beginner's mindset.
No musical
so when is the last time that you learned a new skill? And then if you have, then describe the feeling of being the student instead of the teacher.
Obviously, living here in Mexico, I'm trying to learn Spanish. I can point and shoot and get my point across, but to actually speak like like a human being, it takes some study, and it's hard to learn. And I tell every teacher, man, you need to go learn something different, something that's really hard. Go speak Chinese or something. You know what I mean? Or go learn how to walk a tightrope, just so you're exactly right, so you can remember what it's like to learn. Because we all get, I mean, you're sitting there and you got this guy, and you say, square your shoulders, and pointing in the left field. You say, okay, square your shoulders, pointing in the left field, square your shoulders, and pulls them back. He says, this right? And you go, good Lord, no, you're still pointing 80 miles into left field. You can't, and you're thinking in your mind, this can't be this hard. Why is this guy just messing with me? And you realize it is hard. It's really hard. And I'm quite sure there's plenty of guitar teachers out there go, hey, making an A chord is just like this. Or there's my Spanish teacher's looking at me going, well, you just make your tongue move in this way. And I'm going, I can't do it. I'm trying. So, as I said, I can get around, but yeah, you need to be fluent. I mean, and the way I look
Are
at it,
you taking lessons for the Spanish? I'm sure that's like
Latin America,
huge
and
for you right
English,
now.
and I'm asking people that live here to speak English because I'm not fluent. How rude is that? So yeah, I'm working as quickly as I can. It just, unfortunately, it takes a while. Trackman, beyond a shadow of a doubt.
Good for you.
And
That's
everybody
awesome.
that
All right. So what is one of the best or most worthwhile investments that you've ever made? Could be money, time, could be anything.
150% yes. And I'll even go to, look, I understand that everybody's in a different part of their life. I go, get a launch monitor. Okay, let's just start there. Get a launch monitor, because it's so much easier to do your job, and it's so much more efficient. And pretty soon you won't be able to stand a lesson tee without using one. It's the same thing as when video was first introduced. You stand out there and some guy's saying, you're taking the club past parallel, and you say, no, I'm not. And then the first time you took it past parallel and he showed it to you on video, you said, God, I thought I took it to chest high. It's that sort of eye-opening thing. And it's just, launch monitors are just, if used in the right way and if used to teach feel, they are just the greatest tools known to man. Yeah, they can tie you up in knots and they can destroy students' games if used in the wrong way, but that's also the danger of technology anyway. So, learn how to use the thing, and I promise you, you'll have much more successful days in the lesson tee and much more unsuccessful days. And, to all you young teachers out there that are sitting there going, you know what, do I want to drink beer tonight, or do I want to be a great teacher? You know what, instead of drinking 10 beers, drink 5, put 5 beers worth of money back and buy yourself something. Because if you don't invest in yourself, nobody else will when it comes to technology. No matter how hard you try to convince the board of governors or board of directors, rather, that they need to buy you a Trackman or whatever, they're not going to do it too often. So do it yourself, and you'll have a lot more leverage, and you'll learn a hell of a lot more to be a better teacher because of it.
Hello, everybody. Guru back once again. Just a couple of things before you get off the treadmill or get out of your car. Huge thank you to my buddy, Tom Stickney, for taking the time to come on the show. It's just a super guy that I've known for quite a few years that's been a huge influence on my teaching and has been such a great friend. Don't be afraid to reach out to him and say hello and just tell him how much you appreciate the information and his willingness to help other coaches. You can reach him on social media hit him up on the Twitter at Tom Stickney Golf, or send him an email and say thank you at tom.stickney@puntamita.com. You need to check out the site because the place that he's teaching at is just unbelievable, and I hope to get down there and do some teaching and bring some members down there to experience a little slice of heaven. I do apologize for the technical difficulties there at the end. I just had one more question for him. You guys can probably figure it out. But again, I've given you all his information and still got just unbelievable content there for almost an hour. So I do appreciate everybody downloading the podcast. Thank you for subscribing, and just thanks for listening and joining. I'm just trying to bring some good information to all the coaches out there, and I appreciate all your support. And as I close every show, make sure you study, practice, teach, and then pass it on. We'll talk to you next time. Thanks so much for listening.